With the best all-inclusive vacation deals to Mexico and the Caribbean, booking your getaway with Cheap Caribbean Vacations means you have more freedom to do your deal. Whether you want to enjoy snorkeling, endless margaritas, and more, or simply soak up the sun and sand in a tropical paradise, Cheap Caribbean Vacations has your deal for that. Plan and book the exact way you want at exactly the right price for you by using our exclusive Budget Beach Finder. Or find a featured all-inclusive package to Iberostar Hotel and Resorts in Jamaica and do your deal at cheapcaribbean.com.
When it comes to playtime, never let your squad down. Unlock elite gaming tech at Lenovo.com. Push your gameplay beyond performance with 13th Gen Intel Core processors. Upgrade to smooth, high-quality streaming with Intel Wi-Fi 6E. And maximize game performance with enhanced overclocking. Win the tech search and head to Lenovo.com. Lenovo.
In 1979 and 1980, 3 women were murdered with links to the same scene, the streets of Fall River, Massachusetts, and/or a satanic cult. Decades after 3 people went to prison for these crimes, we're still asking, did the court system get it all wrong? I'm Charlie, and welcome to Crimelines. Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Fall River cult murders. Go listen to the last episode first, or this one is not going to make any sense. Usually if I split an episode into 2 parts, I try to find a natural dividing line roughly halfway through so that the episodes aren't completely different lengths. But in this case, it just really made more sense to wrap everything up with the trials while it's all fresh in your mind, and finish with the 1980s before we then get into what happened since then and the innocence claims of those convicted. But just to refresh your memory on the legal outcomes in this case. In the murder of Doreen Levesque, Carl Drew and Willie Smith were arrested but not prosecuted because the key witness in that case, Robin Murphy, recanted her eyewitness testimony. Robin had been given immunity in that case. In the case of Barbara Raposa, Andy Maltese was convicted and sent to prison. Robin Murphy was, again, the eyewitness and given immunity. Andy died behind bars in 1988. In the case of Karen Marsden, Robin Murphy, yet again the eyewitness, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. She then testified against Carl Drew, and he was convicted of first-degree murder. And Carl Davis, who was also implicated in the case, later had his charges dropped. Another eyewitness in the case, named Carol Fletcher, was given immunity for her testimony. Carl Drew did not have parole eligibility, but Robin did, thanks to her plea deal. She said she was told by her attorney that she would only serve 12 years on her 15 to life sentence, but that is not what happened, not even close. In 2003, so over 20 years after her arrest, Robin was still in prison and filed an appeal saying that her attorney had pressured her into taking this deal by misrepresenting how soon she would get out of prison. Robin filed this appeal after her 2002 parole hearing, which was her third shot at it, led to the parole board denying release. But Robin also appealed the parole board decision, and she was given an appeal hearing in 2004. And this went a lot better for Robin. The parole hearing was focused on Karen Marsden's case, since that is what she pleaded guilty to and the sentence she was serving. However, it seems by this point, the early 2000s, she had recanted all of her previous witness statements and testimony in all 3 of the murders. Remember, she testified that she witnessed all 3, but her story changed and she had actually witnessed none of them. We know with Doreen Levesque's murder, she had recanted that back in the 80s, which is why none of those cases went to trial. But in the case of Barbara Raposa, Robin was saying that Andy Maltese had sexually abused her for many years, and her goal was to get him locked up so that he couldn't hurt anyone else. I mentioned her future recantation in the last episode. She said she lied and said she saw him kill Barbara when she didn't. As for the details of the case that she had, Robin said they came from the police. They even took her out to the scene, and she could look around and use those little details to then fill out her story. And I believe this could have happened. If you watch the Fall River docuseries, which I recommend you do, and when you do, you will hear everyone say the same thing again and again. Robin Murphy was by far the most intelligent person in this situation. And I think that statement would include some of the investigators. And that's not a shot at them. I'm just saying that's how smart Robin is. If someone like Henry Lee Lucas, with an IQ of 85, could be fed details by the police and then repurpose them into false confessions, Robin Murphy could easily have done it. As for if Robin actually thought Andy killed Barbara, it seems like she didn't really know. But setting him up for a conviction like she did was worth it to her to keep him from hurting anyone else. Like I mentioned in the last episode, she was incredibly pragmatic, and sometimes, in some people, pragmatism overrules morality. And that's basically just a quote from my 10th grade English teacher when he taught us Julius Caesar. But I do want some proof out there that I am applying Shakespeare in my adult life. Anyway, as far as falsely implicating Carl Drew in Karen Marsden's murder, Robin had stuck to her story in the past, including in the 1980s when he tried to get a new trial. But at her parole hearing, she was saying that she didn't witness it, but she did still believe Carl Drew killed Karen 100%. If Robin didn't see Karen get murdered, that meant she also wasn't there and had put herself behind bars for over 20 years for something she didn't do. To explain this, Robin said that she realized that implicating herself made it seem more believable, even with some of those really graphic details she included, like performing a sexual act on Karen's body. She was willing to go to prison so long as Carl Drew was also convicted. That's how convinced she was of his guilt. According to Robin, in 2004, she last saw Karen when they were at her son's foster home, but then she and Karen went separate ways. She had plans to be at Sonny's apartment. Basically, she intended to cheat on Karen that night, so she was purposely trying to not be with her. She didn't suspect anything had happened until the next day when she went to go look for Karen at Karen's grandmother's house, and she wasn't there. After Karen's skull was found, Robin said she was able to make up a believable story for the same reason she could do it in Barbara's case. The police told her too much. They showed her photos, and they even took her out to the scene. As far as the elements of Satanism in her stories, she added those when she was pushed to. She said she heard stories about Carl being the leader of some type of cult, but she never saw anything herself, and she never actually believed it. She thought it was just what Carl wanted people to think to look like a tough guy. Robin outright blamed the district attorney and the assistant district attorney because they had to have known the stories she told weren't true, and they fed her the info anyway and then stuck her on the stand. And that included when she tried to tell them that she actually didn't see Doreen Levesque's murder before Carl Drew's trial in Karen Marsden's case, but they pushed her to testify into what she previously said anyway. Robin told the parole board that she got help while in prison, and that made her realize how wrong her actions were. Lying about witnessing crimes to put people behind bars, even if she thought they were guilty, was not the right way to go about it. After this appeal parole hearing, the board decided to grant Robin release to a residential program in May of 2004. And behind the scenes, around the same time period, Carl Drew was preparing for a hearing for a new trial, not just due to Robin's recanting of her story, but pretty much everyone else's. This really seems to have started in an unusual place, and that is with a former investigator on the case, Paul Carey. He became convinced that Carl Drew was wrongfully convicted. There are some questions about why exactly he thought this, and there appears to have been some bad blood between him and his old police department. So some try to assign a motive to his actions, why he was trying to undermine a high-profile conviction. Basically, in 1983, so not long after this case originally happened, there was a detective on the Fall River Vice Squad that was arrested and charged with kidnapping and attempted rape. A couple of months later, Paul Carey, who was the commander of the squad, was charged with intimidating a witness in relation to that case. The details aren't that important to get into, except he said they didn't have probable cause to arrest him, and he ended up suing the city over it. It was a whole thing. So to say Paul Carey and the Fall River officials were friendly, I would never say that. But I don't know that the bad blood was enough motivation for him to try to overturn the Carl Drew case, because he went to great lengths many years down the road to do this. I think he truly and sincerely believed Carl Drew was innocent, at least innocent in the murder of Karen. Paul and a hired PI worked together in the early 2000s to take another look at this case. The PI's first task was to find the people who testified against Carl Drew at trial and see if they stood behind their testimony. If you remember from the first part, witness testimony was pretty much the entire case. One of the first people they found was Leah, who was the girlfriend Carl Drew supposedly gave Karen Marsden's ring to, and who testified that he confessed to her that he had killed a woman, presumably Karen. According to her affidavit recanting her testimony, she said she had been arrested for prostitution before Carl Drew's trial, and it was not the only criminal charge she was facing at the time. So the DA's office started putting pressure on her, promising her that if she did not help them convict Carl Drew, they would seek prison time on her other charges. And not just that, her son was living with her sister at the time, and they said they would go after her sister as well, meaning her son would end up in foster care. Leah saw it as a choice between Carl and herself, and she certainly wasn't going to go to prison for a man she had only been dating for a few months. So she cooperated and did what the DA wanted her to do. The PI then found Carol Fletcher, who was living in Maryland at the time. Her life had not improved a lot in the 20-plus years since the trial, and she was just about as fragile as she was when they first interviewed her back in 1980. But like Leah, Carol recanted her testimony. She ended up going back to her original statement to the police. If you remember, the first story she told them was that she was in her car with Karen until a customer pulled up and Karen went with him. That part of the story, according to Carol, was the truth, but it just wasn't the whole truth. While they were in the car before the customer pulled up, Karen told Carol that she was with Robin visiting her son, but that she and Robin got into a big fight. Robin ordered Karen to go into town to make some money, and Karen said she was afraid of Robin. The customer then pulled up and she left. Carol herself was working that night, so later on she decided to go over to Sonny's apartment because she assumed Robin and Karen would be over there at some point. Sonny's place really was the hangout spot, and Carol wanted to check on Karen to make sure she was okay if she happened to show up at Sonny's place while Robin was there. When Carol got there, she saw Robin and Karen arguing outside of the apartment building. To continue their argument with a little bit more privacy, they went up to the roof of the apartment building, which was easily accessible. Carol followed them. Once on the roof, Robin started attacking Karen physically. She was hitting her in the face, causing bleeding, and then she started pulling Karen's hair hard enough that she was pulling it out. This attack was brutal, and Karen seemed to be losing consciousness when Robin pulled out a knife. Carol freaked out. She vomited and then ran from the scene. When she left, she was not sure if Karen was still alive or not, but knowing that that knife had been pulled out, she was sure that Karen definitely wouldn't be alive much longer. The next day, Carol said she went out with Carl Davis and bumped into Sonny and Robin. Robin went over to Davis and made a comment about having Karen's hair under her fingernails. Davis then took Carol's car keys and left the bar with Robin. Later on, he told Carol that he had left to help Robin get rid of Karen's body. As for why Carol didn't tell the police that story back in 1980, she said it was because another woman in their circle, Pam, had called her after Karen's skull was found. She told Carol that Robin decided that they were going to set up Carl Drew for the murder. Pam then fed Carol the story that she would eventually tell. They all went out to the Westport woods, and Robin killed Karen on Carl's order. And if she did not go along with the story, Robin would instead implicate her. This call is what made Carol leave the state and go stay with family on the West Coast. That's why she was so upset when the police showed up at her door anyway to question her. She said the investigators told her that if she didn't come back to Massachusetts and testify against Carl, they would then charge her as well, and if she went on trial for murder, she would lose custody of her children. Carol was so distraught about this that during one discussion with authorities prior to the trial, she tried to jump out of the window but was blocked from doing so. I think from the DA's office point of view, it looked like she was trying to escape, but Carol said she was actually suicidal. It was when they promised Carol immunity in exchange for her testimony versus charges if she didn't testify that she decided to just tell them whatever story they wanted to hear and then leave the state again, which is what she did. Using these recantations, Carl got a hearing on his motion for a new trial in November of 2004, so about 6 months after Robin had been paroled. The question his team was asking was that if most of the witnesses against him, including the 2 eyewitnesses, recanted, where was the basis for his conviction?
When it comes to playtime, never let your squad down. Unlock elite gaming tech at Lenovo.com. Push your gameplay beyond performance with 13th Gen Intel Core processors. Upgrade to smooth, high-quality streaming with Intel Wi-Fi 6E. And maximize game performance with enhanced overclocking. Win the tech search and head to Lenovo.com.
Lenovo.
With the best all-inclusive vacation deals to Mexico and the Caribbean, booking your getaway with cheap Caribbean vacations means you have more freedom to do your deal. Whether you want to enjoy snorkeling, endless margaritas and more, or simply soak up the sun and sand in a tropical paradise, Cheap Caribbean Vacations has your deal for that. Plan and book the exact way you want at exactly the right price for you by using our exclusive Budget Beach Finder. Or find a featured all-inclusive package to Iberostar Hotel and Resorts in Jamaica and do your deal at cheapcaribbean.com.
Hi, I'm Cindy Crawford, and I'm the founder of Meaningful Beauty. Well, I don't know about you, but I never liked being told, oh, wow, you look so good for your age. Why even bother saying that? Why don't you just say you look great at any age, every age? That's what Meaningful Beauty is all about. We create products that make you feel confident in your skin at the age you are now.
Meaningful Beauty. Beautiful skin at every age. Learn more at meaningfulbeauty.com.
Robin was called to testify at the hearing, and initially she tried to take the Fifth. And the judge asked, for what? She had immunity in the Doreen Levesque case, she had immunity in the Barbara Raposa case, and she already pleaded guilty in the Karen Marsden case. There's nothing left. Now, if she was worried about a perjury charge for lying on the stand from 20 years earlier, that statute of limitations had long run out. But Robin insisted, and so the judge got her an attorney to consult. After that happened, Robin did testify, and just like she told the parole board, she said she was not at Karen Marsden's murder. She said something about how she believed her testimony was true at the time she gave it, but she no longer believed it was. And the problem really with Robin's recantation is that she went back and forth so many times. At a parole hearing, they noted that Robin had actually recanted her testimony, not just in the Doreen Levesque case, but also the Karen Marsden case even before this. In June of 1981, after Carl Drew's trial, she said she actually hadn't seen anything. But then she went back on that again and said she was actually telling the truth. Then she recanted her testimony about Doreen Levesque's murder, but not the Karen Marsden case. So at which time was she telling the truth? According to Carl Drew, Robin never told the truth. She was there at Karen's murder, but that's because Robin and Robin alone was responsible for it. Carl was not there. Robin denied this at Carl's hearing for a new trial, and she said that Carol's story of whatever happened on the roof just never happened. She said she saw Karen when they visited her son, and then not after. The state accused Robin of recanting in front of the parole board simply because she thought it would help her chances at getting parole. If the board thought she had participated in all of the terrible things she had confessed to, they never would have let her out. But if she portrayed herself as just a 17-year-old girl who had gotten wrapped up in wanting to get justice for her friend, and the worst thing she actually did was perjure herself, well, that's the kind of person a parole board would release. I think most of us have had some type of experience with a person like this, not to this degree, not to them lying about huge things, but that person who is always embellishing stories, or they're telling you tales that you know probably aren't true, that even when they do tell you the truth, you don't believe them. But Carl Drew's motion for a new trial did not hinge only on Robin. Another person who testified at this hearing was Sunny. By this point, she had turned her life around enough that she was actually telling her story to groups of young people to convince them that the path she went down was not where they wanted to follow. Sunny gave some new information at this hearing that we had not heard before since she did not testify at trial. She said that after Karen went missing, there was a supposed sighting of her in town, and Sunny was excited to tell Robin the news. It sounded like Karen was actually okay. But Robin's response was that Karen was dead. Sunny said she wasn't and that someone had actually seen her, but Robin said no, she was dead and they would never find her body. Sunny said that Robin never implicated Carl Drew in Karen's murder when she told Sunny about it, except one time. After Carl slapped Robin, Robin made a comment about Carl not even being there. Sunny asked her which Carl she was talking about, and she clarified that she was talking about Carl Drew, and she said he wasn't there, but payback was a mother effer. If she was going to prison, she would have the satisfaction of taking him with her, which is what she did. Sunny also testified that the ring Carl gave Leah was given to her before Karen's murder. Sunny remembers this because Aaliyah was so excited that she got a ring from her boyfriend that she was showing it off. But the point is that it couldn't have come from Karen's body if he had it before she went missing. Sunny said that this was all information she had given Carl Drew's attorney, and he subpoenaed her to testify for the defense. But if we remember from the last episode, she ended up taking the fifth and being escorted from the courtroom, and the question that was lingering was, why did Sunny take the fifth when she was not implicated in any aspect of the crime? Sunny explained this at the hearing. She said that the assistant district attorney met with her prior to her testimony and intimidated her into not testifying by threatening to pursue her as a suspect. He said that they would offer Carl Davis, who had not been to trial yet, a plea deal in order to implicate her. According to Sunny, Carl Drew's defense attorney was present at this meeting, and then they got Sunny an attorney to consult who advised her to just take the fifth. Just for the record, Carl's attorney denied he was at any meeting where Sunny was threatened by the DA's office like this, so he did not back up her story. Sunny also testified that after Carl Davis was released from pretrial lockup, he attacked her. I looked it up and found the article from when this happened. After Davis was released from pretrial detention in January of 1982, his charges in regards to Karen Marsden's murder were still pending, and he showed up at Sunny's apartment, pounding on the door. She refused to open it, so after he left, Sunny went over to his sister's apartment down the hall to ask her for help, and Davis was there. He physically attacked Sunny, knocking her to the ground, beating her in the face and chest, kicking her while she was down, and according to Carl Drew's account, he stabbed Sunny while yelling, quote, "I know Robin told you it was me who helped her, and I'll kill you before I go back to jail." A neighbor confronted Davis and tried to restrain him for the authorities, and Davis attacked him as well. He ended up slashing the guy's hand with the knife, and the guy got 14 stitches. Davis stayed on the run for about a week and a half before he turned himself in, and he was facing 2 counts of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon and 1 count of intimidating a witness. His trial for Karen Marsden's case ended up getting pushed out until they dropped the charges against him. But for the attacks on Sunny and her neighbor, he was given a few years behind bars. I do find it relevant that Carl Davis attacked Sunny after getting out of lockup. Carl Drew said the motive was to stop her from testifying, and since they were initially charging him with intimidating a witness, I think that's pretty accurate. So I have to assume her testimony would have implicated Carl Davis in the crime. And we know Carol Fletcher had mentioned Carl Davis in her affidavit, saying that he helped move Karen's body. Carol also testified to this at the hearing. Basically, she gave the same story to the judge that she had put in her affidavit, including the story about what she says she witnessed on the roof. And Leah also testified in line with her affidavit. So, we have Robin mostly recanting, we have Carol completely and unequivocally recanting, and we have Carol and Sunny both testifying to some type of knowledge that Robin killed Karen, with Carol claiming she witnessed the lead up to the murder, and Sunny saying she heard Robin confess, and at no time was Carl Drew involved. The judge, though, still denied Carl a new trial. He said that the witnesses recanting were not credible, which is fair, they were changing their story. But if they're not credible at a hearing in 2004, they probably weren't credible in 1982 when they were in active addiction and were trying to avoid going to jail themselves for various crimes. But as we know, after someone's convicted, the burden of proof shifts to them. So if these witnesses are not credible, it is a ding against Carl at this point. Meanwhile, 42-year-old Robin Murphy was trying to adjust to life outside of prison walls for the first time since she was 17 years old. And it was a bit of a rough adjustment. She was given a warning for a potential parole violation in March of 2006 when she was associating with a known felon, which is a restriction I personally hate. The life a lot of people live prior to going to prison means that they are around other convicted felons. And then if they're in prison for 20-something years like Robin was, their fellow inmates are their friends, and sometimes their only support system. I think it's fair to say you cannot associate with a felon who you were convicted of a crime with, but beyond that, this restriction is too much in my opinion. Anyway, Robin was given a warning on this, but she would not be so fortunate the next time. In 2011, Robin was driving away from a house when she was pulled over. Her passenger was found to have heroin in her purse that she had just purchased. Robin, though reports are that she was not using, found herself in the middle of a drug bust. Robin was not supposed to be around drugs or to be in contact with other felons, but her passenger had put her in the vicinity of both. Then Robin made 2 pretty big mistakes in how she handled it. The first was something that she didn't do that she should have done. She did not report it to her parole officer, even though she was required to report any and all contact with law enforcement. And then Robin tried to explain to the parole board that she was actually just giving an acquaintance a ride and she really had no knowledge of what was happening. But it turned out at least one part of this was a lie, the acquaintance part. They had evidence that the woman was Robin's girlfriend and had been for some time. They didn't like this, so they sent Robin back to prison. Robin applied for parole again in 2017 and it was denied. And then not that long after this, the Fall River docuseries started to take shape. It came out in 2021, but it had been filming pre-pandemic. The docuseries takes a look at all 3 murder cases and it uncovers some information. One big thing was that the filmmakers were contacted by someone who wanted to remain anonymous, but we're going to call him John because stories are just easier to tell when everyone has a name. John lived in the same apartment complex as Sonny, and he said that when he was a little boy, he heard a bunch of noise coming from the roof area of the building. He went up there to see what was going on, and he witnessed Karen's murder. Though the location of the murder was the same as Carol's news story, other details didn't match because he said he saw 3 people up there in addition to Karen: Robin, Sonny, and the other Carl Davis. John said he told his mom about this close to when it happened, so when he was 5 or 6 years old, and then he told the police about it a few years later, but they didn't take him seriously. The filmmakers asked Robin Murphy about this on camera and told her who made the statement. And she knew John, his mother was in their circle, and she quickly pointed out, I think, the most logical rebuttal. She remembered that he would have had to have been pretty young back then. And was he really old enough to be up on the roof late at night? That just didn't make a lot of sense, and Robin continued to deny any involvement in the murders. The docuseries really explores that question in the last episode. Who did kill these women? The first theory is the state got it right. Carl Drew and friends killed Doreen, then Andy Maltese killed Barbara, and then Carl Drew and some other friends killed Karen Marsden. But the real challenge with this theory is that it's mostly based on Robin's eyewitness testimony, and her stories have changed several times over the years. Paul Carey, the investigator who eventually became an innocence advocate for Carl Drew, believed that Robin actually committed all 3 murders herself. The murders of Doreen Levesque and Barbara Raposa are so similar. It's hard to believe they were not committed by the same person. They were both bound with fishing wire and bashed in the head with something that was nearby. Paul Carey believed that Karen knew Robin had committed those murders, and so Robin killed Karen. Robin put herself as the witness to 3 different murders. She said she lied so she could send away one man who she thought committed 2 of the murders and another man she believed preyed on girls. But what Paul Carey was arguing was that she lied about who was there so she could push off the blame onto someone else. Think about it. If Robin didn't do it and did not witness any of these murders, why was she willing to go to prison for any length of time? She could have just stayed out of it and stayed out of prison. But if she was the one who killed 3 women and they offered her a deal for immunity in 2 of the murders and what she thought was going to be 12 years in prison for the 3rd, she would jump on it because otherwise she'd be in Carl Drew's shoes and in prison for the rest of her life.
When it comes to playtime, never let your squad down. Unlock elite gaming tech at Lenovo.com. Push your gameplay beyond performance with 13th Gen Intel Core processors. Upgrade to smooth, high-quality streaming with Intel Wi-Fi 6E. And maximize game performance with enhanced overclocking. Win the tech search and head to Lenovo.com.
Lenovo.
Hi, I'm Cindy Crawford, and I'm the founder of Meaningful Beauty. Well, I don't know about you, but I never liked being told, oh, wow, you look so good for your age. Why even bother saying that? Why don't you just say you look great at any age, every age? That's what Meaningful Beauty is all about. We create products that make you feel confident in your skin at the age you are now.
Meaningful Beauty. Beautiful skin at every age. Learn more at meaningfulbeauty.com.
And it's not like the police were the only people she implicated herself to. Robin told Sonny and at least one or two other people that she killed Karen. Why say it if she didn't do it? I do have two hang-ups on this theory that Robin committed all of the murders. The first one, maybe it could be resolved pretty easily with more information, but I want to know how Robin got anyone to where they were found. Every story I've read about her from that time period has her in someone else's car or hitchhiking, so it's pretty clear she did not have her own transportation. We have Carol explaining that Carl Davis took her car to help Robin move Karen's body, but that would mean she just left the body somewhere for several hours. And then we have the woods behind the print shop where Barbara was found, and then the school where Doreen was found. How did Robin get them to those locations without a vehicle? Was she just walking around town with them and suddenly attacked? I mean, I don't think that's a case-breaker detail, but it is something I would want cleared up. The other issue I have here is the motive. Now, Robin has the same motive as Carl does in the Doreen Levesque case. Doreen wouldn't work for either of them. And in the Karen Marsden case, Robin does have a bit more of a motive because Karen was getting ready to leave her. And that is always the most dangerous time for a woman in an abusive relationship. But why Barbara? Paul Carey theorized that it was jealousy that Barbara was with Andy, and he refers to Andy and Robin as having been romantically involved in the past. And that makes me kind of want to throw up. The characterization that Robin was in a relationship with Andy is disgusting. Andy was abusing her. It is impossible to see it any other way. Based on the timeline of events, this quote-unquote relationship would have happened no later than when Robin was 14 years old or so, and Andy was in his 30s. But I believe Robin when she says that it started earlier than that, more like when she was 11, in part because a very brave woman went on camera in the Fall River docuseries to talk about the abuse that Andy did to her. And what she talked about was very similar to what happened to Robin, and at around the same age. I believe both of them wholeheartedly. But let's say Robin viewed or perceived her relationship with Andy with some type of fondness and Barbara was replacing her and she was jealous. I don't see it. By that point in Robin's life, Andy and Barbara had been together for some time, and it sounds like Robin was exclusively dating women by that point. Robin is a lesbian, and I don't get the impression that she had many consensual sexual encounters with men, so I just don't see this as a motive. I'm not saying there isn't another motive that we just don't know about. I'm saying that the only motive I've seen put forth just doesn't land for me. But something pretty solid that the Fall River docuseries puts on the table is a third possibility. The narrative for 40 years was Robin versus Carl, Carl versus Robin. But what if everyone has overlooked the other guy, Andy Maltese? After all, he's the one who brought Karen and Robin to the state police to have them talk about Doreen's murder. Karen was so torn up about it that a lot of people still believe she witnessed it, even if Robin didn't. But what if it wasn't Carl Drew she saw kill Doreen, but rather Andy? And then he was pushing her to implicate someone else. But because it wasn't the truth, Karen was having a hard time actually saying that it was Carl, so she was dancing around it. As far as being afraid of Carl Drew, she would have been afraid of him whether she implicated him based on the truth or a lie. But when it comes to Barbara, I do have to wonder, why would Andy go to the police with this story about this vision or dream or whatever at all? If he did it, he should have been trying not to talk to the police. But I think, like how everyone said Robin was the smartest person in this case, I think Andy was not. But maybe he thought he was smarter than he was. Maybe he thought he could give them this story, they would buy it, and he could lead the police in a different direction. If Andy was guilty in Doreen Levesque's case, after he was arrested for Barbara's murder, he would have realized that Karen was a loose cannon. He didn't manage to get her to point the finger solidly enough at Carl Drew for an arrest to happen in Doreen Levesque's case, and if they linked the very similar circumstances of Barbara's death and Doreen's, and then Karen started talking, he would be facing a second set of charges. No one really considered Andy for Karen's murder because he had just been arrested in Barbara's case. The assumption was that he was locked up, and surely he didn't make bail on a murder charge that fast. But James Buddy Day, the director of the Fall River docuseries, found evidence that that assumption was wrong. In the docuseries, you are going to hear Robin and Carl's reactions to hearing this information about Andy, but you will also hear from Andy's daughter, who does not believe her father was guilty. Honestly, her interviews were heartbreaking because she is genuinely suffering over this whole thing. It sounds like she really loved and believed in her father. I will say that the information given to Robin during the docuseries seemingly changed her mind because she said in 2024 that she no longer believes Carl Drew is guilty. But if Paul Carey was still alive, maybe he would say that she just realized she had someone new to blame for her own crimes. I'm not really sure what to think about this one. It does seem logical to assume that the same person who killed Doreen killed Barbara because of how similar these cases were. Their victimology was identical, and features of both murders were the same. And Karen may have been killed to keep her quiet, but I'm also open to the possibility that her murder was not directly connected to the other two. While the docuseries does make a good case for a single killer, I think there may have been two. One person who killed Doreen and Barbara, and another who killed Karen. But as I said in the last episode and in several episodes over the years, I am someone who can be pretty easily swayed with new evidence. And the problem with this case is there is a lack of physical evidence. I cannot imagine that they preserved much after they got their convictions, and I highly doubt they will pay to test any swabs or clothing items now, which is really the only way we would get any physical evidence to help guide us to the truth. Honestly, these cases come down to witnesses who were active substance abusers, not just at the time, but most of them in the years since. That can affect memory in significant ways. Then we add on the pressure to testify coming from the DA's office, which I do believe happened to some degree. The witnesses are telling nearly identical stories, including naming which assistant DA was the most threatening towards them. Basically, they had a motive to lie and circumstances that would lead to them not really remembering 40 years later exactly what happened and when. As of this recording, Carl Drew remains in prison. Robin Murphy was sent back to prison after her parole violation. The parole board decided in 2012 to leave her locked up, and she was then denied parole in both 2017 and 2022. But in March of 2024, that hearing went a lot better for her. The board recognized that Robin had taken advantage of a number of programs in the prison to deal with her past trauma and addiction issues. She had enrolled in a program through Boston University, which allowed her to earn a bachelor's degree, while she was also working training dogs for veterans. All of these things would help her adjust better to society if she was released. And something that I think seems pretty significant for Robin is that she was ready to acknowledge how her own lying had put her in the position she was in, and the parole board found evidence she was rehabilitated enough to be paroled. She was released in May of 2024 at the age of 61. If you want to learn more about these cases and the innocence claims of Carl Drew, I am going to leave links to the Fall River docuseries and the Justice for Carl Drew Facebook group in the show notes. But as always, when we engage in true crime content that necessitates talking a lot about the possible perpetrators, we need to always make sure that the victims are not forgotten in that. And in this case specifically, we need to remember that Doreen Levesque never got any justice. And depending on who you ask, maybe Barbara Raposa and Karen Marsden didn't either. It is time for Patreon birthday shoutouts, and being that I'm here in Kansas City where it's very cold, I'm excited to send some warm wishes to my listeners who support me on Patreon and Supercast. I want to say a very happy birthday to Osa, Jonathan, Allison, Vanessa, Sky, Sabrina, Tuesday, Jasmine, Michaela, Heather, Carly, Christine, Nicole, Katie, Angie, and Gabrielle. May your next year be filled with endless joy, lots of podcasts, and new adventures. So to everyone with a January birthday, I want to say happy birthday.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.